So in 2023, I had an idea of having the audience vote for the different aspects of the Treaty of Versailles as well as the other treaties that ended World War I. How would Europe and the Middle East be redrawn? It was really fun and chaotic, so later I had the same idea for the Congress of Vienna after Napoleon's defeat, and then the 1947 partition of India. The next one, though, I eventually decided on the partition of Rome. The Roman Empire was famously a single entity until Emperor Diocletian in 286 declared that Rome was too big for one man to rule, so he divided the empire into two. Diocletian ruled the east while Maximian ruled the west. Then in 293, each emperor appointed a junior colleague that would also help rule parts of their empire, known as dioceses. The senior rulers were called Augusti, and the junior rulers were called Caesares, derived from, of course, Emperor Augustus and dictator Julius Caesar. This time period was known as the Tetrarchy, literally rule of four. This didn't last very long though, and thanks to civil war and political drama, Constantine the Great reunified the empire in 324. Then Rome got divided again, then united again, and so on. Yeah, it was a mess. The Tetrarchy didn't last, but eventually the general West and East division was permanent by 395. You'll notice that the West-East division in 395 is slightly different from the original partition done by Emperor Diocletian. With the chaos that was involved through dividing the empire, I figured, imagine if that was even more chaotic. What if Diocletian divided the empire north and south? Some weird diagonal thing. Maybe Diocletian has a brain worm and does a weird checkerboard pattern to prevent one region from being dominated by a single ruler. I don't know. So I had you guys assign 3 dioceses to each of the Augusti and Caesares of your choosing. It could be as random as you want. If somehow one of them was winning in more than 3, then I would just go with their top 3 and give their 4th one to the second place winner. Then for even more chaotic randomness, I gave you the opportunity to pair up the co-rulers however you wanted. You could have even had Maximian remain a partner of Diocletian for all I cared. So, this is the map on how the dioceses were assigned historically in 293. Now, how did you all vote? I said, how did you all vote? Is this thing broken? No, it turns out the majority of you just voted the exact same outcome as the historical one. I even included this map in the survey as reference for the people who would want to avoid doing that, but you all insisted on the historical outcome anyway. You also voted to pair the co-rulers the exact same way as the historical outcome as well. Well, okay then, so much for that. I mean, I wasn't just going to edit the results for a more interesting video, but I did try to think about why this outcome happened. Possibility A. Diocletian just had it right. Whether or not you think the division of Rome was good or bad for stability or administration, if you had to do it, I suppose maybe it's just harder to rationalize it differently than the way Diocletian did it. I made the joke about a north-south partition, but then looking on the map, that's actually extremely difficult to do rationally. Rome and Constantinople are natural centers of the empire, but it's harder to find a similar balance of north versus south. Maybe if you did north and south, you could have Alexandria be a southern capital and Rome be the northern, but even past that problem, the Mediterranean is the most obvious natural division between a north and south of the empire, and there's just so much more territory in Europe than in Africa and the Middle East. In my mind, a weird diagonal thing with like North Africa, Iberia, and the Middle East as one empire could have been interesting, like an inner Roman Empire and an outer Roman Empire. But realistically though, it'd be much harder to administer that amount of vastness without Rome or Constantinople as its center during this time period. Since these surveys are just for silly fun, I almost expected a weird and chaotic checkerboard sort of thing, but maybe my audience just can't bring themselves to go for that. Perhaps aesthetically, it just wasn't a pleasing idea. A checkerboard sort of division wouldn't even be border gore so much as like fake balkanization. Looking at the closest votes, Viennensis or Pannonia flipping I could see being aesthetically pleasing in people's heads. One connects Iberia to Italy, the other makes the Diocletian partition the 395 partition. Thrace was also kind of close, making me think that maybe people like the idea of Constantinople controlling both sides of the Bosporus, which, yeah, fair. But perhaps in people's minds, Diocletian had the best possible partition the first time around. Possibility B, the survey was convoluted. In the past few videos of this series, I usually gave multiple choice options for things like a border change or an annexation, and I suppose having all the diocesan rulers on a matrix grid and just having you assign them to whomever might have been a bit convoluted. But then again, I thought, well, you could have reorganized the Roman provinces into new dioceses and have the boundaries be even more out there, but that seemed like a much more convoluted option to me. Maybe I could have had a first question on how to divide the Roman Empire in half before assigning the diocese? But if I'm not changing the diocese boundaries, then that would essentially be the same as assigning the diocese to the ruler. So I guess I'm not sure how I could have done it differently without making it even more convoluted. Possibility C, smaller vote count. This one did have a notably smaller vote count than the previous ones. Usually I announce these at the end of videos and give anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks for voting. Then I usually post reminders including on the last day to vote. However, YouTube has always been all over the place when it comes to notifying people of anything, and anytime I post on my channel's page, it's a dice roll on how many people actually see it. Then whenever something does get posted, I'll get several comments saying they never saw anything and are sad they missed out. So please, if you haven't already, make sure that notification bell is on, for however much that helps. Maybe I need to have longer voting time. Maybe like a month or 2, but I don't know. Well, I guess we could see what the second place choices would have resulted in. So, the crazy Roman partition we missed out on was this. See, now that's more interesting. Is having a middle diagonal slice area dumb? Yes, but imagine the chaotic bureaucracy of that sort of thing. That'd be hilarious. Meanwhile, if we went with the second place choice on the Tetrarch pairings, we'd actually have this. I wouldn't even know what to call this division, honestly. Maybe this was a dumb survey. But I still like the idea of this series and want to do more in the future. So I made another Google form, and this time you can give suggestions or ideas on what other peace treaties or partitions I could try on a future video. I'll be looking forward to seeing what you guys would find interesting. Until then, I'm Emperor Tiger Star, and I'll see you guys next time. By the way, remember when you guys voted on an alternate history scenario that you wanted me to make? Well, the first part was posted on my extras channel a couple of months ago, and part 2 just came out pretty recently, so if you haven't seen it, be sure to check it out. Oh yeah, and I also stream on Twitch sometimes and play games on there, so I made a new gaming channel where I'm posting edited down Twitch streams. I've been doing a lot of old internet games from the 2000s recently, like games from FunOrb, so if you find any of that interesting, be sure to check it out.